What if society could judge you before you even did anything wrong? Not after the crime, not after the violence, before it. That is the terrifying idea at the center of Psycho-Pass. People talk about this anime like it was just another cyberpunk thriller. But what makes it feel so modern is much more disturbing. It imagines a world where your mind is constantly measured. Your psychological state is turned into public data. And the line between safety and control disappears completely. Psycho-Pass is not really asking whether technology can stop crime. It is asking what happens when fear becomes the foundation of social order. Because once the system decides your potential matters more than your actions, freedom starts to feel conditional. The world of Psycho-Pass looks clean, efficient, and rational. But underneath that surface, it is built on permanent judgment. Every person carries a Psycho-Pass, a measurable mental state that tells the system whether they are stable, dangerous, or close to becoming a threat. That is what makes the idea so powerful. You are not judged only by what you do. You are judged by what you might become. And once that logic enters society, everything changes. Police no longer just investigate, they preempt. Citizens no longer just live, they self-regulate. People begin to fear stress, fear instability, fear being seen as abnormal, because even inner tension can become evidence against them. This is why Psycho-Pass feels so relevant to modern life. It understands that the scariest systems are not always violent on the surface. Sometimes they are smooth, predictive, and socially accepted. That is what makes the Sibyl world so dangerous. It does not merely punish, it shapes behavior before people are even aware of it. And if you think about it, young people would be the first to break inside a world like this. Because Psycho-Pass is really a story about what happens when identity gets trapped under constant evaluation. When every emotional fluctuation matters, every insecurity becomes risky, every doubt becomes measurable, every social failure becomes psychological evidence. That sounds extreme, but it is not as distant from modern life as we want to believe. Young people already live under systems of soft judgment. Algorithms rank attention. Platforms reward image control. Social media turns anxiety into visibility. People learn to manage how they look, how they speak, how they react, and sometimes even how they feel in public. Psycho-Pass takes that pressure and pushes it to its most brutal conclusion. What if emotional instability was not just embarrassing, but legally dangerous? What if stress did not just hurt your life socially, but reclassified you as a threat? That is why the show feels less like a distant science fiction fantasy and more like an amplified version of a world where people are already afraid of being psychologically exposed. The real genius of Psycho-Pass is that it does not only give us a controlling system, it also gives us Makishima. And Makishima matters because he exposes the lie at the heart of social order. Sibyl presents itself as neutral, objective, and necessary. But the show keeps reminding us that a system deciding who deserves freedom is never truly neutral. Makishima is terrifying, not just because he is violent. He is terrifying because he forces everyone around him to confront the weakness of a society that outsourced morality. That is also why Akane is such an important protagonist.
She is not simply fighting criminals. She is slowly discovering that the system protecting society may also be deforming it. And once that happens, the question stops being, how do we defeat chaos? It becomes, what kind of humanity survives when order becomes more important than truth? Psycho-Pass understands something many dystopias miss. Control does not win because it is obviously evil. Control wins because it feels convenient, efficient, and socially comforting.
That is why psychopaths still land so hard now. We already live in a world addicted to prediction, scoring, profiling, and behavioral monitoring. Institutions want better forecasting. Platforms want better targeting. Companies want cleaner risk models. And individuals are constantly nudged into becoming easier to classify. Psychopaths pushes all of that into one terrifying social machine. It asks what happens when a society becomes so obsessed with preventing danger that it starts treating human complexity as a flaw. And that question matters now because modern systems are often sold to us the same way Sibyl sells itself. More safety, more optimization, more efficiency, less uncertainty. But uncertainty is part of being human. So the real horror of psychopaths is not just surveillance. It is the possibility that society could become emotionally intolerant, that inner disorder, confusion, pain, and contradiction could all become unacceptable. And once that happens, human beings do not become safer. They become easier to manage. That is why psychopaths still feels so sharp. It understood that the most dangerous future is not one where machines simply dominate people. It is one where society becomes so afraid of disorder that people start accepting psychological judgment as normal. And once that line is crossed, freedom no longer disappears all at once. It gets replaced by permission. Permission to act. Permission to feel unstable. Permission to remain human. And maybe that is what makes psychopaths so disturbing. It does not ask whether the system can catch monsters. It asks whether the system itself becomes one. Next time, we move from social control to social performance. Because Oshi no Ko is not just about fame. It is about what happens when young people get consumed by image, attention, and parasocial desire.